It's a 2023-2024 New Orleans Pelicans season preview next on The Dime.
You are now listening to The Dime with Josh and Quab, your go-to NBA podcast. Subscribe on Apple, follow on Spotify, and be sure to hit up the YouTube channel for video content. And now your hosts, Josh and Quab.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to The Dime. Today, we preview who I think is the most slept-on team going into the 2023-2024 season, and that's the New Orleans Pelicans. And we have a special guest. He is the host of the LockedOn Pelicans podcast, covering the New Orleans Pelicans. Everybody, please welcome to the show for the second time, Jake Madison. Jake, welcome back, JD. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk some hoops with y'all here.
Yeah, this is going to be a good time. The Pels, as I was just saying right before we hit record, I think they're the most forgotten team in the NBA. They were the one seed heading into December, or in December last year. And then a bunch of injuries, a little bit of drama. And all of a sudden, it's like no one remembers that they were even good.
Yeah, you're remembering the drama right now instead of the play on the court. It's an interesting offseason here.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting offseason. So let's get straight into it with some headlines. Headline number one. Unhappy with New Orleans. Zion will soon seek a trade elsewhere. Is this real or is this fake news?
I actually think it's fake news. I might not have said that, say, 2 years ago, but I am seeing a more bought-in Zion than I've seen maybe ever, I think, which is a great sign for New Orleans. You know, he has at least said all of the right things about wanting to be here, not wanting to go anywhere else. He's actually in New Orleans right now, working out at the team facility, has been all off season. That's the first time that he's done that. I've seen a couple photos of him, talk to people around him. He looks to be in tremendous shape and is kind of committed himself in a way that he never has before. And it's just like one of those things, you know, all of it, it's almost like peer pressure got to him, you know, shaming him kind of got to him. All that bad press that he's had earlier in the offseason, you know, throughout his career seems to have maybe just like finally he was like, I don't want this to be the narrative around me anymore. And so I think honestly that he kind of likes it here. He seems to like the teammates. So with him working out here, I'm going to say this is fake news.
You're not worried about like the Knicks. Some people say the
Nobody's worried about the Knicks. Nobody's worried about the Knicks. Stop it.
Someone might want that, but you know, look, I'm not saying he's going to play here in New Orleans for forever, but I think right now, like things are actually okay and good. This could change in a year. It could be a volatile situation, right? We've also seen him kind of commit to, you know, the grind, the hustle, what you need to do in the NBA in the past. And then he hit some adversity in the middle of the season and that all goes away. So that'll be the true test. But as of this moment, like things seem okay.
What about the other side, like management? Do you think there's going to be a point where management says, like, you know what, I'm fed up with this. He doesn't seem to be committed with us. I mean, you said before, this season he seems to be committed and he seems to take the things very seriously, but maybe he falls back to old ways. They're like, yeah, maybe we should trade him before his contract's up and we get value out of him.
Yeah, I mean, look, they've thought that before. Yeah. I can tell you that. They've thought that before for sure. You saw everyone saw their interest in Scoot Henderson this offseason around, you know, the NBA draft. Look, you weren't landing Scoot Henderson without including Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson in a trade. It's really as simple as that. And they love Brandon Ingram, so I don't think that's going to really change things. And, you know, even guys like Mark Stein have reported before that they looked into at least shopping or having discussions about Zion Williamson with other teams in previous years. So this is, I think, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, like a make or break year for the Pelicans, kind of like top to bottom, including Zion and his tenure here.
All right, let's go into headline number two. It says, despite FIBA's struggles, Brandon Ingram poised to take the next step into stardom. A lot of people are high on Brandon Ingram. You hear players talk about him all the time, how good he is. Injuries have kind of riddled him in New Orleans. What do you think going into this year? What do you expect from him? And I assume it's pretty much what you just said. It's a make or break year, right?
Yeah, I think so. You know, when you look at his career, especially in New Orleans, this is a dude that's been really consistent. You know, he's averaged the first 2 years in New Orleans, 23.8 points per game. 2 years ago, it was 22.7. Last year was 24.7. Like, it's all within basically like a point or two of one another. Like, we know who he is and what he's capable of doing, and that's a really good player. Yeah. He is struggling with Team USA because I don't know if he's the most adaptable player, but even then, do you want him just being a catch and shoot guy on the perimeter? Probably not, and that's why they moved him to the bench. He comes off the bench, had 5 assists, second most on that team in that win in over Jordan. I'm going to call this fake because I don't think he's going to take the next step into stardom. I think he's just going to be a really good player again. He's a borderline all-star every year is kind of how I probably look at him. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. He is capable of potentially taking a step forward, but if everyone's healthy, with Zion Williamson, with CJ McCollum on the team, Trey Murphy looks like he could kind of be a breakout guy. There's how much more can he do on this team with his usage rate and the usage rate of other guys? I'm calling it fake because of that, not because I think he's a bad player or anything like that.
Is there any small improvement you like to see from him this upcoming season?
Yeah, there's two areas you want to see. He needs to shoot the three ball more and better and more consistently, right? You're playing with Zion Williamson. You have to shoot 3-pointers more so than he does. He shot 3.6 last season, down from 4.1 the year before when he didn't have Zion on the court with him. You have to shoot the three ball more. And I'd like him to feel more empowered to really play make at the rim instead of settling for some of the mid-range jumpers that he has. Keep attacking, put pressure on the rim and play make out of that. You can hit those mid-range jumpers, don't get me wrong, right? I don't mind him taking those sorts of things. But if you can kind of improve the efficiency and create for others a little bit more, I think that would do wonders for him.
All right, and finally, headline number 3. Fun while it lasted. Time to move on from Jonas. Now, Valanciunas, his name was linked to some trade rumors a couple of months ago. His contract will be up at the end of the year. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. Jake, is he someone who you're looking to move before the deadline, or do you think the Pelicans should ride it out with him?
I think this is very real. Okay. They're looking for a different starting center. There's no secret, I think, kind of about that. And this is not because Jonas Valanciunas is a bad player. Not at all that he's a bad player. He just doesn't fit what they're doing. They run a switching scheme defensively in the pick and roll. He can't do that. He's a drop coverage guy. They refuse to do that when he's out there. He's somewhat of a high usage rate big man too to get the points that he does. Yeah. He doesn't shoot a ton of threes. He's not like a lob threat, right? He needs to be a post up big man playing with his back to the basket, putting shoulders into guys. Again, you have Zion, CJ, Trey, Brandon Ingram, you don't need to be dumping the ball off to him in the low post and using a possession that way. It's just not what you need. So this is if you're breaking up with someone and you're it's not you, it's me. That's essentially what the Pelicans are doing here with Jonas Valanciunas.
Hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. Is there anyone you have your eye on as a Pelicans fan or anyone?
Yeah, I mean, they're pie in the sky candidates here. It'd be great to get a guy like Jarrett Allen in, right? You get rim protection that way. That vertical spacing threat, but more just a lob guy, a finisher, right? Oh, okay, just toss the ball up and he throws it down, and that's how he gets his points. And I think that would work really well on this team versus the way that Valanciunas scores.
Was Jackson Hayes not the type of fit when it came to that? What are your opinions on him?
Jackson Hayes' problems was a lot.
Yeah.
I went on our Lakers show when they were when they had signed him, and we're not supposed to swear, and I was he effing sucks at basketball, and he was oh man, my bad. I know better than that too. So that's my thoughts on Jackson Hayes. I mean, he had every opportunity to claim a spot and a rotation spot and to be a starter, and every time they did that, he played poorly. Yeah. Then he'd go to the bench, he'd come back, show a quick little flash, and then they give him the opportunities again, and he's never lived up to it. Part of it's on the coaching staff. They put him in the short corner too often, and he's not a 3-point guy. So what are you doing there? Yeah. That's more of a offensive philosophy thing. But no, he made so much sense as a center next to Zion Williamson and just never lived up to the potential, in my opinion. Maybe a change of scenery will do that.
All right, so that's going to do it for headlines. Let's move forward, previewing the 2023-2024 season. But before that, actually, I want to know what your opinion. I don't even think it's opinion. I think it's subjective, not subjective. That the reason why the Pelicans didn't really do much last year was because of injuries, right? I mean, is there anything else that you would like to add on top of that?
No, this could have been my show for the past 6 months here, right? If they're healthy, they're good. If they were healthy, they would have been good. They were first place in December, and you don't win an NBA title in December, but you don't get to first in a very competitive West, I thought, by accident. Yeah. Even after they lost first in the West, they held on to third for a while, even when Brandon Ingram went down. He missed 29 straight games at one point. They were competitive just with Zion on the court. And then it was once he went down that things really started to, hurt the Pelicans. They were down both Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. And they still finished with a winning record. They were 42-40. You had 29 games out of Zion. Imagine if you had 60.
What are your feelings on CJ McCollum being the veteran voice of the team and one of the lead guards of the team?
They need to, if they use him properly, it's a very good fit, I think. They wanted him to kind of be a point guard, to be kind of floor general CJ in a way that he was just never allowed to be next to Damian Lillard. And we saw a lot of that this year. I wouldn't say it went particularly well. This is a guy that works much better off ball as a catch and shoot guy, a movement based kind of guy. And if they can get CJ back to doing that, I think you'll see his shooting numbers go up. He was banged up this past year too, dealt with a thumb injury all year, a couple of other things. So him coming in healthy, I think, as a third option, potentially fourth option at times, I think is fine. And they needed just kind of like a mature veteran in the locker room to get some of these young guys to listen to.
Now, who would you want to be that facilitator then, if it's not CJ?
So the way I kind of view them, and this kind of like previews this season with everything, is, they don't have like a point guard on the team, right? Or at least not in the starting lineup, let's say. You have Jose Alvarado off the bench, and that's kind of the extent of it. Maybe Dyson Daniels too. They're kind of going like ball handler by committee a little bit, right? I think you look at Brandon Ingram, and he's somewhere between 50% to 75% of like a pure ball handler. The point Zion experiment, just because of his court gravity, is a very real thing too. I think you can get a lot of that kind of, initial initiation of your actions of your offense through both of those guys, with CJ taking up like a quarter of it a little bit and not putting the majority of it on his plate. So I think you kind of see point forward Brandon Ingram, point Zion, and a little bit of CJ in there too. You can even get Herb Jones handling the ball a little bit as well. He did that in college a bunch as well.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to address that at the deadline at any point? Is that something that you think is like that needs to happen for them to take the next step, or do you think they can make do in the West with that though?
I think it'll work. I think the point Zion experiment from 3 years ago, whatever the heck it was now, was really good. That he just creates open shots for teammates because you have to throw 2-3 bodies at him when he has the ball in his hand. So I think it works. If they give the ball to Brandon Ingram and let him play make a little bit more, like you kind of saw him do against Jordan for Team USA, that I think kind of gets it done. And you have enough guys that move the ball well enough that you won't kind of run into like a stagnant offense or anything like that. I think long term, they hope it'll be Dyson Daniels, who they drafted 7th overall a year ago now. That's kind of the long-term play. I think if they were to add anything, it wouldn't be a point guard necessarily, just to kind of facilitate the offense.
Got it.
You mentioned Dyson and also Herb Jones. What are your expectations for those young wings you guys have? That's Trey Murphy, Dyson, Herb. What do you see them? How do you see them looking this upcoming season?
Look, I think there's some very good wing depth here, right? I'm a big fan of Herb Jones. I wear the Not on Herb T-shirt here, which, by the way, you look like a loser in Los Angeles wearing this and walking around just telling I'm uncool, and they don't get what it means. They signed him to that big extension this offseason. I think they feel there's more offense to come from him. We know he's nearly an all defensive NBA team kind of guy. You look at a guy like Trey Murphy, I think is poised for a huge year. When he's up for an extension, he's going to get a max, right? And he looks like kind of the next coming, with adding to his game the 3-point shooting, the size, the dunking, even added kind of a mid-range game to his bag this season. You have Dyson Daniels, who at 6'7" just is great on the defensive side of the ball, keeps the ball moving, kind of like a taller Lonzo Ball a little bit. And if he can develop some more offense, I think that's going to go a long way for him. I think they're pretty happy with the collection of talent they have. They just kind of need some of these guys to take a little bit more of a step forward, and they're pretty well stocked at that position for the most part.
Do you think there's enough minutes to go around at that position? Because they're pretty stacked on the wing.
It's a good question. I think if you try and project the 10-man rotation, some people are out, right? Like, is Najee Marshall in the rotation? I'm not entirely sure. They just drafted Jordan Hawkins as a guard, but, he's probably not in the rotation to start. I think they're going to need to be very careful about how they structure all of that because there really might not be. But, I think when you look at like Dyson Daniels, like he's a guard to them. That's not someone that's going to be playing the threes, not going to be playing on the wing. Yeah. That opens up a couple minutes here and there.
So do you think you mentioned Jordan Hawkins? So do you think there's any chance like Jordan Hawkins or even EJ Liddell from last season, they get any like rotation minutes?
Yeah, there's a huge chance because have you seen the injury history on this team?
He said they might be starting.
Going down.
I was like, come on, man.
I just want to help.
I don't trust the team. You look at the Vegas over and under on them, and it's basically like factoring in a ton of injuries to this Pelicans team because like what else are you supposed to do? I get it. So
you're at the point now where you're like, it's inevitable. It's happening. I know it's happening.
Oh my God.
I'll say this. When you look at this team, and like a lot of like Pelicans fans, they're more or less running it back this year, right? Like there's no significant changes, right? Let's, cool. I like Hawkins. He's a good fit. He should be a good 3-point shooter, but that's not like a major addition, a major upgrade to this roster or anything like that. They didn't trade for Damian Lillard. They didn't shake it up with Scoot Henderson or, go get Bradley Beal or, whatever. They're running it back, but they're not actually running it back because one thing they are doing that's been reported on is restructuring the player performance and care team to maybe address some of these injuries and things like that. So a lot of their biggest moves have been behind the scenes kind of things that are hopefully going to be designed to keep these guys out there on the court and prevent like, a repeat of the past like 4 or 5 seasons that we've had here. So yeah, Liddell, Hawkins, Sebron, like all of those guys could get minutes for this team. They're not going to be in the rotation if everybody's healthy though.
So you're basically saying if you see him playing, something's wrong.
Yeah, something wrong. That's a great way to put it.
All right. I want to turn our attention to Willie Green, the head coach. Now, he hasn't had a full roster. He had him in first place in December. What are your thoughts on him? Do you like the system he runs? I know they tried Point Zion, trying different things with CJ McCollum on the ball. Is there something you would like to see him doing differently on offense or even on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, look, he's a good coach. I think he's a great coach for this team. I like NBA head coaches being former players, let alone like kind of like journeyman, like longtime role players like that. You seem to just get buy-in from your guys when it comes to that sort of thing. You can go to a role player, a bench guy, and get them to really buy into what they're doing because, hey, I did this for 13 years in the NBA. I made a lot of money. If you want to, have longevity to your career, you should probably listen to me here. And I kind of dig that.
Kind of what I'm talking about.
Things. Yeah. It's like I'm an expert here, right? So I like him from like that perspective. He does really connect with the players a lot. Defensively, look, with all the injuries, they had the 6th best defense in the league last year. Even with Valanciunas and his obvious like defensive deficiencies there, they were 6th best, right? Like they're doing something right. Offensively, though, they need to make some changes. They need to make a lot of changes offensively. They were not good, particularly in the half court. They were fine in transition. They were not good in the half court last year. I think they ranked like 27th in the half court according to Cleaning the Glass. That's not going to cut it when you have Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy on the team. Like you need to probably be a top 15, top 10 offense. And it's just because they ran a lot of isolation heavy stuff. Brandon Ingram, go bounce the ball, go do your thing. CJ dribble the heck out of it. He can't really get to the rim. Okay, take a contested mid-ranger. Zion, there was no problem because let Zion do whatever the heck he wants. He's that good and shoots 70% at the rim there. They need to completely change the offense, and that is something that they are doing. They revamped the coaching staff a little bit. They brought in James Borrego, the former Charlotte Hornets head coach, to come in and just entirely redo the offense to a much more motion-based offense. So a lot more off-ball movement, a lot more sets and kind of moving with purpose rather than isolation style. I think that'll help guys like Brandon Ingram, help him get more 3-point opportunities, put him in positions to take more 3-pointers and those sorts of things. So I am very hopeful that they're going to be doing the right things this year offensively because, again, if they're healthy, the amount of talent they have in terms of scoring is up there with almost any other team, I think, in the NBA for the most part.
In your opinion, is there a viable missing piece that would take this team from, I guess, to make this team like a championship contender?
Yeah, I mean, so
If they're healthy.
Yeah, if they're, of course, right?
If they're healthy.
It's literally in parentheses before everything we say
Name of
here,
the
right?
episode, if they're healthy.
So I don't know if there's one thing. I think there's areas you could go with it, right? Like you could add a more dynamic guard to the backcourt, a slasher guy that could get to the rim would certainly not be a bad thing. They don't really have anyone with that skill set. That's not what CJ does. That's not what Dyson Daniels does. Jose, I love him, is 6 foot maybe and undersized there, right?
He's not 6 foot.
He's not 6 foot. You know, there's limitations to a lot of these players. So, you know, adding a tall guard that could drive and attack, I don't know, like Darian Seabaron did in Summer League a bunch, you know, could really fit in. And I think just add a dimension that they don't really have. I think the other area would be center. You know, if they don't close with Jonas Valanciunas. Yeah. If you're paying your starting center $15 million and you're not closing with them because they close with Larry Nance Jr., which then is undersized and hurts you when it comes to rebounding, right? There were a couple games they lost because they just were like, okay, we're going with Nance here. They got out rebounded in the final 5 minutes and you lose the game by giving up offensive boards and second chance points. Or you keep JV out there and you just get burned in the pick and roll after pick and roll. So if they can kind of solve that solution, which is easier said than done, right? Like the ideal guy is Brook Lopez, who's probably the ideal guy for like every NBA team.
His name always comes up.
I know, it's so annoying. He's a unicorn, right? 3-point shooting, rim protecting, mobile big that rebounds at above average rate. Like, yeah, that would give the Pelicans like a title contending status. The problem is, there's just one of them basically. Yeah.
Quab's the former Net fan, by the way, and Brook didn't have that 3-point jumper with the Nets, and he didn't have probably rim protection.
No,
he wasn't that guy. I don't know.
He wasn't that guy. I don't know how he transformed into the player he is, but he did.
Yeah, that's how like Jason Kidd is like top 3 all time in like 3-point makes or something in the first half of his career. It's like, no, don't do that, man.
First half of his career, he was acing Kidd because he had no J. Like,
yeah. So the Pelicans were first. We mentioned it 100 times now. First in December, and if they were healthy, we don't know where they go now. Where do you think they stack up with the rest of the Western Conference, if healthy? Do you have them in the upper echelon? Are they contenders? What do you think?
Yeah, they're like the 4 or 5 seed to me. Like I'm penciling them in around like 47 wins, something like that. I think is a reasonable number. I think, you know, I try and look, I cover the team. Yeah, I could say 55 or something. And it's like, that sounds right. But I'm trying to be a little realistic here with everything. You know, I think they're right around the 4 or 5 seed is what it could be. Like if they got home court advantage in the first round, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like if they're healthy, the offense should be a top 5 in the league with the amount of talent they have. The defense was good last year. You know, when you look at a lot of the metrics and things, they kind of measure out as like a very good team for the most part. You know, I'm not going to put them above the Denver Nuggets, right? Like I'm not going to probably put them above the Phoenix Suns when it comes to some of those teams. But there's a couple that you look at them and you're like, no, they should be okay. And I think they're kind of right in that range. You know, are they better than the Lakers? Maybe. You know, the Warriors, maybe not. The Clippers, the Kings, I think they're all kind of in that like general range of stuff. I think they're better than the Timberwolves, maybe the Mavericks too. Like 4 or 5 sounds about right to me. And I think it even could be higher depending if guys like, you know, Trey Murphy take a leap in those sorts of things.
Season prediction. I know it's unfair. It's not even preseason.
Let's get unfair. You're just going to replay this and whether I'm right or wrong.
No,
so.
we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't do that.
Well, no, if I get it right, replay it.
Yeah. But I'm not. You're not going to get a tweet 6 months from now. Jake said that the Pelicans. No, I'm not going to do that. Don't worry about that.
Come find you in Los Angeles. And like, we need to talk
I know your Twitter handle.
Yeah. No, like I'll put him at like 5th in the West. Like I put him at 5th in the West, and I feel pretty good about that. Like if they're out of the playoffs, like something went horribly wrong. Something went horribly wrong, and it's probably injuries, and you probably at that point just can't keep doing this, right? Like it's not working. It's a shame. It's how it goes. Let's blow it all up. If they were healthy and missed the playoffs, Everybody needs to be fired. Everybody needs to be fired, and they need to clean house. Like, I mean that. David Griffin, coaching staff, like something went horrifically wrong if you were healthy and you just missed the postseason, because this is arguably one of the more talented teams they've ever had in the history of the franchise. So, there's going to be some injuries. It's going to take a little bit for the offense to gel too, I think, as they kind of implement the new scheme and everything. It sounds like a 5th seed to me.
Make or break. That's what you said at the beginning of the episode.
Make or break.
Definitely make or break. All right, Jake. Well, listen, man, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate you coming on. I also, shout out to you, man, because you've been doing Locked On for since I've known you, and the channel
almost
really
7 years now.
It's taken off in the past couple of years, which is really cool to see, man. I'm seeing the engagement you have on the channel and on Twitter, and it's really cool to see someone like stick with it and be rewarded for it. So shout out to you, man. That's some really cool stuff.
I
let everyone know where
appreciate
they can
that.
find you. Yeah. Let everyone know where they can find you if they want to watch the show, all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's LockedOn Pelicans. It's literally wherever you get your podcast. It's also on YouTube there. I'm on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it. It's at Nola Jake. And yeah, season 7 of the show. Watch some bad basketball, so I deserve some good basketball.
All right. You can follow us at the Dime NBA. I'm Josh Rodriguez at Josh_Rodriguez_. He's Quab at Quab, aka Yes. We'll see you next week for another episode of The Dime.